Too many of those, it looks like.
Bye. Yes. Is anybody from East Shelby here tonight?
I do not see right now.
Okay.
If not, we'll recognize them anyway and thank, but I don't see them.
Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting for Monday, August the 12th. We welcome all those that are here in attendance this evening. We've got a pretty lengthy agenda this evening. We do have a portion of our meeting known as Citizens to be Heard, and we have several sheets. If you would like an opportunity to speak to the board, we have guidelines out on People Street. If you would fill one out and present that to the clerk, there's still time to come forward and bring a sheet forward, and we hope that you would consider doing that at this time. Also, we will meet this evening at the conclusion of our meeting. We will meet as a beer board and have two board suspension hearings as well. Today's the first day of school, so we'll welcome all those with school children and teachers and staff, administration, and all those associated with our fine Germantown Municipal School District. We will say a collective welcome back to school on the first day of school. With that said, this evening our invocation will be led by Parks Director Pam Beasley. Our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Alderman Rocky Yonda. Please rise.
Let us pray. Gracious and Heavenly Father, you are indeed the giver of all good gifts, and we thank you today for all of the blessings you have bestowed upon us, for the quality of life in our city, and for the many opportunities we have. Lord, we lift up a prayer for our leaders tonight. We ask that you bless the work here as we continue to seek your wisdom, guidance, courage, and strength. Guide and direct our meeting so that it is full of productivity and respect for one another. Lord, we also lift up a special prayer for our country in the wake of last week's devastating events. We ask that you would bless our country, our state, and our city with your love and your compassion, and grant us the humility to always choose to walk in the path of righteousness. We pray these things in your almighty name. Amen.
Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. This evening we would welcome to the dais our regular parliamentarian, Dr. Schultz is out of town. This evening we'll be joined by Dr. J. Earhart Brown. Welcome to our meeting this evening. We appreciate you being here. Brings us to item number 4 on the agenda, setting the agenda and adopting the agenda. During executive session, the board met at 5:30 and thoroughly reviewed the complete agenda, preliminary and regular. At that particular time, there was a desire to move item 16, Resolution 19R08, the apartment moratorium, from the conclusion of the meeting to item 10B. Item 10, Ordinance 2019-11, Amendment to Fire Prevention Ordinance Chapter 10, third and final reading, will be item 10A, and item 16 will be 10B. Is there any other adjustments or modifications to the agenda before a motion to adopt? Alderman Yonda.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move number 13, the change order number 9 for the GPAC Grove outdoor venue, which is reimbursed totally by the change orders. The change orders are reimbursed totally by the GPAC Foundation to the preliminary.
That would be regular agenda item 15, correct?
I'm sorry, yes, 15.
Yeah, 15 would be moved to item M. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second, and we will vote on each one of these prior. If there are more adjustments, we'll do those each one separately. It's been properly moved and motioned. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders.
No.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
The item, item 15, I'm sorry, item change order 15, item 15, change order number 9, GPAC Grove Outdoor Venue will now become item M on the preliminary agenda. Are there any other modifications at this particular time? Alderman Owens.
Yes, Mayor, I think you probably may have meant this, but I believe we were going to move the resolution 19R0816 to, it makes sense at least to move it to prior to 10. In other words, making that 10A and then the corresponding items afterwards in order so they would be taken together.
So they can be, point well made. If there's no objection, we'll move that. And again, so it'll just be item 16 will be 10A and 10 will be 10B. Without objection? Any other adjustments? Yes, Alderman Sanders.
Yes, Mayor, I'd move to pull item 9K off of the preliminary agenda so we can have some discussion on that.
It is moved, item 9K, purchase, repair to well number 9 at Johnson Road Water Treatment Plant, be moved to the regular agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
No.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda. No. Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Motion fails. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda?
I believe it passes, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the vote again? Go over the votes again.
Vice Mayor Gibson, no. Alderman Massey, yes. Alderman Owens, yes.
Okay, sorry. All right, so that particular item will be moved to item 16, if that's okay with the board. All right, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as modified to include item 15, now being item M on the preliminary agenda? Item J from the preliminary agenda will be item 16. Item 10A will be apartment moratorium, and item 10B will be ordinance number 2019-11.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, please call the roll.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
The agenda has been adopted as modified. Thank you, Board. Brings us to item 5 on the agenda, approval of minutes. This is from the meeting, the regularly scheduled meeting on July 22nd. During executive session, there were no modifications. Are there any at this time? Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented to the public?
So moved.
Is a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda. Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Minutes have been approved. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda this evening, citizens to be heard. And if anyone else would like an opportunity to fill out a sheet, do so now as I read the guidelines for citizens to be heard. Citizens to be heard is designed to gain input from the public and not for immediate responses by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The intent of this agenda item is to provide the public a platform to be thoughtfully heard and not a forum for dialogue, discussion, or verbal exchange with the board. While the board cannot assure each speaker of a specific or individualized future response, the board will consider the public comments, and any supporting materials provided by the speaker. Public comments should be limited to 3 minutes per resident. Speakers are asked to refrain from using names of personnel or names of persons connected with the city, particularly when lodging a complaint. Speakers will not be permitted to engage in gossip, hearsay, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. Presiding board chair shall have sole authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to board rules. And as we go through the sheets, make sure they're filled. I know everyone read the guidelines and attested to fulfilling those. Citizens to be heard is an exchange with the citizenry to the board, and please operate with the proper decorum. We don't clap or do any kind of calls or anything of that nature, and so let's make sure we adhere to that. Please forgive me because I cannot make out completely the last name. Margaret, that resides at 7932 Cross Ridge Drive. If you could come forward, how do you pronounce, and make sure the green button is on. You can adjust your microphone up and down, and at the top it does swivel. Hit it and make it green, and if you could state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Margaret Lorraine Hall. I live at 7932 Cross Ridge Drive. I have lived in Germantown for over 20 years. I was a school teacher. I'm just recently retired. I've always been proud to live in Germantown, but I am, for the first time, not so proud. First of all, I have to address, I was an English teacher. I have to address the money we paid to put that sign up with the inaccurate spelling and the incorrect grammar that we paid to have printed that obviously somebody didn't proofread and we put up. That does not make me proud. Second thing that does not make me proud is the fact that I'm 69 years old. I'm just retired. I was a previous school teacher. And you are telling me that I cannot go into Farmington Park from school hours? Two of my very good friends live across the street. We can't go over there and read a book. We can't walk our dogs. We can't drink water. All of these things seem outrageous to me. It's a park. You can't eat in the park. You can't drink in the park. You can't take your dogs to the park. It's just outrageous. Either it's a park or it's a school playground. In my opinion, spend the money and fence off an area for a playground. Here's the issue. You cannot turn kids loose anywhere, in the halls, whatever. The key is adult supervision. I don't care if you have to have whatever you have to have over there. It's adult supervision. If you've got people watching those kids and telling them not to go certain places and monitoring the behavior, there could be extreme bullying going on. You know, the key is supervision. And you are locking out a great part of our area. Yes, it's only three parks, but that park is closest to me. And I wish you would reconsider because there's a lot of citizens and not happy with what you're doing. So I hope you will reconsider. I'm trying to be respectful. I would like to know how much that sign cost. That was so poorly written and misspellings. That does not speak to me of competent government. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. So I hope you will reconsider the rule and you will tighten up on
You have
things
15 seconds left, ma'am. Go ahead.
we spend to have printed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. If Parks Director Beasley, before the meeting concludes, if you could get our resident your business card and share some information with her. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be David Clark. If you could come forward, please, state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Good evening. David Clark, 2158 West Cumbernauld Circle, Germantown, Tennessee, 38139. I'm just speaking on behalf, I came to you guys last month when we could speak about the fire ordinance. I'm just coming back up to speak about that again I feel like there's still some unanswered questions. We got some answers between the last meeting and now, but there's just still some unanswered questions as to whether, when does this go into effect and things of that nature. So I guess I'm here to ask that you vote no for this. At the very least, Alderman Owens brought forward some amendments during the executive session that I would ask that you guys consider and adopt if you do feel that this needs to go forward. With that being said, I do have a full 3 minutes, and I think I told Alderman Massey last time I was going to come up here and say a little bit of positive things about Germantown instead of y'all just hearing negative things about Germantown. So I'd like to congratulate you on opening up Forest Hill Elementary School today. That's a positive thing in Germantown. I'd like to congratulate you for opening new businesses in Germantown, Untuck It, and some other stores that have come about. And then also just the way that Germantown has gotten behind Germantown Gives and helped out with the flood victims. So I'll try to be here next month and give you 3 more positive things that Germantown's doing. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Next speaker would be Woods Weathersby. Mr. Weathersby, if you could come forward and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Yes, sir, Mayor. My name is Woods Weathersby, and I'm here on behalf of Boyle Investment Company concerning the apartment moratorium.
Move your microphone up just a tad bit. There you go. There you go. That's all right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Concerning the apartment moratorium, I was here previously when the moratorium was put into effect, and there were certain sites, Viridian particularly, which is the one I'm here to speak to, and it was grandfathered. And I know we have the new application and the ordinance that's been proposed, and I know there's been an amendment which I haven't seen, but I hope that it's considered that Viridian, and I understand there's been some changes in other sites, so I'm not speaking to them particularly, but as to the Viridian, I assume and hope that that the city of Germantown will recognize that those are vested rights and those are protected under the laws of the state of Tennessee, and that'll be considered that way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weathersby. We appreciate you coming forward. Next speaker will be Pauline Latham. If you could come forward, Ms. Latham, and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Pauline Latham, 6958 Country Road, 38138. Thank you all for your service, first of all. Recently, over 500 citizens voted in a Germantown-wide next-door poll, indicating that only 7% favor the aggressive build-out of 2,141 apartment units in 10 years. 65% want 0 apartments over 10 years, and 27% say keep the same ratio of apartment units to residential units that we have now, which is between 6 and 7%, rather than the 16.3% that would occur with the aggressive build-out. The poll is statistically valid, and I sent it to the aldermen this morning. Details are available for all at shiningalightOnGermantown.com. As you vote on the resolution today, please listen to the citizens. Now I'm going to switch gears a little and just talk about a statement that I heard made at the work session, which was, "A city that is not growing is dying." As a general proposition, that statement does not hold water, at least not for suburbs. Even suburbs that lose population can thrive and be great places to live. Such is the case in Terrell Hills, Texas, a suburb of San Antonio where I was raised. Terrell Hills, Almas Park, and Alamo Heights are contiguous suburbs of San Antonio that have lost 10% of their population from 1960 to 2010. Yet they have the highest property values in Bexar County because of great schools, low crime, and light traffic. These cities are all landlocked. Yet in the 60s and 70s, homes were built, not apartments or mixed use. My childhood home sits on a little more than an acre lot that is being sold for possible development into 3 homes, and the asking price is over $2 million. Think about it. Despite having little commercial development and only 1 apartment building, the property taxes in Terrell Hills are 1/3 lower than in San Antonio and lower than in Almas Park and Alamo Heights, which both have greater commercial development. Other Texas suburbs have similarly lost population and are in similar circumstances. I'll just say University Park in Bel Air in Houston.
15
and Highland
seconds.
Park in Dallas. The health has not been maintained by shoehorning in overcrowded developments. It's due to maintaining the existing zoning standards and having a good, larger area job growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Latham, for coming forward. The next speaker will be Sandy Davis. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
Yes, my name's Sandy Davis, 2857 Odam Lane, Germantown. First, I'd like to address the stack and pack apartment agenda of this board. If apartments were truly needed, Thornwood would be full with a waiting list instead of half empty and handing out free flowers in the lobby. Mr. Mayor, your hand-picked planning committee is trying to convince us that up is down. Of course, cramming people into smaller spaces will increase traffic, crime, stress our already aging infrastructure, and lead to school overcrowding. Your planning commission can put up all the little graphs and charts they want to, but it flies in the face of simple common sense. More importantly, it is contrary to what the citizens of Germantown have repeatedly told you. They don't want more apartments, period. That we are paying to be told up is down just adds insult to injury. And this euphemism you all have come up with, mixed use, is ridiculous. Slapping a deli up with the apartment changes absolutely nothing. Why don't we have an honest conversation about why developers are pushing apartments instead of condominiums? I think it's because apartments are heavily subsidized and the developers make more money. Your apartment agenda has nothing to do with what this community wants or needs. Secondly, I want to speak to transparency in our government. Personally, I'm furious the tax-paying public is being forced to pay attorneys who are working against our best interest. One prime example is the changing of Robert's rule that you all pulled a few months back after running it by a city attorney. Talk about perverting transparency, yet you did it anyway. Just because an attorney tells you you can doesn't mean you should. The tax-paying public is also footing the bill for these same attorneys to review and withhold over 8,000 emails and attachments concerning our city business. It begs the question, is this board hiding something? And that man right there, when you shut him out of official city business and you shut him down, you're shutting us down and you're shutting us out. Finally, let me just say that I find it the height of arrogance that I can't stand up in my city hall and call out my elected representatives by name unless I'm giving them accolades of some sort. So I'll close with this. You people have forgotten your place. It is not your job to rule us. It is your job to represent us. And on that, you have failed miserably.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. The next speaker will be Frank Uhlhorn. Mr. Uhlhorn, if you could come forward and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
I'm Frank Uhlhorn.
If you could adjust that up.
I'm Frank Uhlhorn. I live at 8559 Dogwood Road. Forgive my speech, it's screwed up these days. I'd like to start off by first saying that I'm a great admirer of the Germantown Fire Department. I have been around the city a long time. I've sat in your chairs. And I've seen the remarkable things that they've accomplished in my time since the 70s in Germantown. Chief, you've done a great job and you deserve all the accolades. But in saying that, I want to ask you not to mandate private residences sprinklers. There's a place for sprinklers, and I've been part of this discussion since they were first mandated and then repealed between 20 and 25 years ago. There's a place for them. They began as commercial apartment warehouses that needed to have a sprinkle system. If people were there during the day, that's great. But if they're not there at night, they need some kind of backup to protect their property. So it's not really a life safety issue there, but it is a concern. If I lived in Piperton or Fayette County and had either a volunteer department or no department, I think it would be a wise decision to have a sprinkler system. So it's something that the citizens do not want, that you're going to mandate when there's already a system at hand that saves lives. Germantown's never had a fire death that was not basically self-inflicted by someone smoking in bed while using oxygen. That's our only fire death. So if you want a quick notification, a smoke detector and system that's electronic is the way to go. It takes a high degree of temperature to set off a sprinkler system. And by that time, the smoke has probably killed you anyway, but you'll have a good-looking corpse. It's an overreach of government, I believe, and the home builders are here to ask you not to do it. We had it at one time. It was rescinded. You know, if you have a false alarm with a sprinkler system, good chance that if there even is a fire that you'll do more damage than what the fire would have. But certainly if you have a false alarm with a smoke detector, that now the county code requires far more than we did 20 years ago in every bedroom, in every hallway, and other places as well. It's overkill, and there's an option of doing it a different way with the fire and smoke
15
detectors.
seconds.
So, you know, I don't really understand what's changed in 20 years, except that we've got a much better fire department that's now Class 1 ISO. Congratulations.
Please
but
conclude your remarks. You're at your time.
I don't think it's necessary, and I hope you'll support this.
Thank you, Mr. Yulhorn. That concludes citizens to be heard. Was there anyone else that had a sheet and didn't get it turned in? Thank you, citizens that came forward, and thank you for exercising great decorum this evening as well. We very much appreciate that as a board. Item 7 on the agenda this evening, special recognition donation, East Shelby Republican Club. Mr. Lawton?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Following the dramatic flooding on June 7th, a number of organizations, including the City of Germantown, Shelby County government, private individuals, businesses came forward with relief effort in the form of dollars and cents to support those who were impacted. These dollars were then turned over to the Germantown Kiwanis Club, who is currently making, as we speak, donations, writing checks to the individuals most impacted by the flooding. The East Shelby County Republican Club, and Nasser, you may want to come forward, or Ms. Gibson, has raised $500 for this effort, and they would like to donate that to the City of Germantown, and we, in turn, will donate that to the Kiwanis Club for proper distribution.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Pat.
Vice Mayor, do you want to, are you going to make a presentation this evening as well, or?
Presentation.
Okay.
Mayor. I just want to say I have no complaint. This is the best city in the state of Tennessee, and thank you so much for, as long as we have those leaders, we will continue to be number one. Our heart goes out to the flood victims. That's why we're here. If we can do anything else, we'll be more than glad to do it. East Shelby is the oldest and the longest and the largest Republican grassroots we have here, right here in Germantown. We meet every fourth Tuesday, every fourth Tuesday of the month, 6 o'clock at Pickering Center. Everybody is welcome to come. Join us.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor, did you want to add any comments?
I did want to offer my thanks for East Shelby bringing this forward. And also, this is a way to encourage others. We have really only until the end of the month. The Kiwanis Club of Germantown is going to be offering that. And so for anyone that's listening that would like to contribute, whether it's nonprofit, business, or personal individual donations. Germantown Gives, go to an Iberia bank to make that donation. But Nasser, thank you for your leadership on that. Appreciate it.
Vice Mayor, thank you. Anything else we can do, Mayor, Aldermen, Mayor Sanders, you know. So let us know. How can we help?
Thank you, Nasser. We appreciate that. Is there a motion to accept a donation in the amount of $500 from the East Shelby Republican Club and approve budget adjustment number 20-5?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey. Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Motion passes. We appreciate it very much. Thank you, sir.
Mayor, who would say no to a check? I'm just wondering.
Not many. Thank you. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda this evening, Alderman Liaison Reports. We go through position 1 through 5, and if you could kind of limit your comments to the 3 minutes for citizens to be heard as well. Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. The Beautification Commission met on August the 5th after a 2-month summer break. At that meeting, we reviewed their funding plan, approved the Beautification Commission Business Award for August that we'll hear about next meeting, and established a holiday decor planning subcommittee. The group was also invited to tour Director Beasley's, our Parks and Recreation Director's home garden last Sunday to learn about sustainable gardening and in the residential setting. Due to Labor Day holiday, the Commission's next meeting will take place on Tuesday, September 3rd at 5:30 at the Parks and Recreation's office. And that completes my report for this week.
Thank you, Alderman. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Public Arts Commission met to discuss the process for creating and implementing a master plan for public art and received an update on progress at the Grove at GPAC. The Parks and Recreation Commission met on Thursday, August 1st, to adopt the rules for the newly renovated Farmington Park and put in place stronger safety rules for shared schools and parks. Their next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, August 22nd, 5:30 at the Parks and Rec office, where we'll review progress on CIP projects and discuss next steps for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The Farmers Market will be open every Thursday through the end of August from 4 to 7:30 at C.O. Franklin and Morgan's Woods Park in the woods next to the Pickering Center. The Neighborhood Preservation Commission will meet this Thursday, August 15th. The Commission is already busy planning for their Fall Neighborhood Summit, Tuesday, October 29th, where we'll be focused on improving communications and within neighborhoods, emergency preparedness, and neighborhood preservation. Board of Zoning Appeals will meet tomorrow, August 13th, and the Library Board. And this is where I may need all 2 minutes. They are very proud to share some exceptional end-of-the-year and summer reading results. And I know our library director, Daniel Page, would attribute those achievements to the strong team that he's put in place from dedicated staff, the Friends of the Library nonprofit, the leadership of the library board, and enthusiastic members who use the library as the rich resource that it is. Summer reading alone. For the first 18 days of summer, the summer reading averaged the library averaged over 1,600 visits per day. From June 1st to July 31st, over 64,000 visits. 2,800 youth in programs and over 1,100 in adults. The summer reading signups were well above what we've really experienced as a library and as far as that community, with over $13,500 in prizes that the community partners use to encourage lifelong readers. End of the year fiscal numbers, again, library card participation up 25%. If you don't have a library card, please go get one. It's one of the best resources that we have here in the city. Active cards were up over 104% from last year. 271,000 visits at our main library, 26,000 at the Genealogical Center. All of those things make up for a great facility. The Friends Bookstore sold over 80,000 books this year. Value on the street for that would be approximately $500,000. Number of active card holders for our Regional History and Genealogical Center, 174 increase from last year. And I say all of those numbers to say this. There are great things happening at the library. If you can participate, please do so. Congratulations, Daniel. Well done. That's my report.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I don't know if I've ever heard street value associated with books, but that's a lot of street value. Alderman Massey.
Mayor, the city's tree board will meet tomorrow at 12 o'clock, August 13th, at the Parks and Recreation Building, which is located next to Southern Social. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Owens.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. The Design Review Commission met on July 23rd and approved a multitude of signs, including the Stone Creek Shopping Center sign policy, a new retail establishment called Warehouse 67, Let It Fly, a new bar restaurant there at Forest Hill and Poplar, as well as our very own Forest Hill Elementary School and some subdivision entrance features for the Old Field Green subdivision. The Planning Commission met on August 6th and approved a revision to a plat setback in Chapel Cove, and the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission meets Wednesday evening. That's my report.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Yonda.
Thank you, Mayor. The Germantown Athletic Club Commission met. We had a great summer. The average of the summer kids camps were 63 kids. All of our statistics up for the summer. But the fall programming is in, and the focus is on group fitness programs. And, of course, that's free with your monthly dues. That was an advertisement of some sort, I'm not sure. Environmental. Of course, there's a lot of environmental concerns at this meeting, but the one that was really brought to the top was a 25% reduction in our July recyclables. We're trying to find out what happened there. We also have Amnesty Day. Some people call it Dumpster Day, but it's September 21st, 7:30 to noon. That's new time. It's at Johnson Road and Southern Avenue locations. I'll repeat this again at each one of our meetings in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Sanders, I think you omitted one of your reports. Did you want to display your sign or for public safety?
Oh, I'll be glad to. Brought it to show the board, but I'll show it.
Why don't you show it to the audience, too?
As I've spoke about a couple of times, the Public Safety Education Commission has been looking at our monthly police reports. We see a lot of thefts from vehicles. Most of the time, vehicles are unlocked. So the commission has decided to launch a campaign for Lock It or Lose It to keep Germantown safe and to keep your valuables safe. So as we review our monthly police reports, we'll try to see if they're concentrated in any certain area of town and temporarily display these signs in residents' yards just to heighten awareness and hopefully reduce that crime of opportunity. Also at the Germantown Festival, we'll be handing out information at our booth, and we also have our Lock It and Lose It campaign on these bags. So we'll have safety information for children and adults alike. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. And from the mayor's office, just briefly, it was mentioned earlier about all the accolades and the significant numbers at our community library, and I know our librarian is here, Daniel Page, somewhere, and he shared a note with me that we have a young 5-year-old resident, Cal Sobjak, and I hope I pronounced that right. He had a bake sale, raised $25 over the summer at the bake sale, and donated that to the library to buy books about dinosaurs. So I know that that made my day, Daniel, and Cal made my day as well, and let's make sure that we get those dinosaur books for him and all the other children. So that concludes Alderman liaison reports. We move to item 9 on the agenda, the preliminary agenda. The preliminary agenda was thoroughly reviewed in executive session at 5:30. There were some items that were moved off and on the preliminary agenda. I'll just read those into the record at this particular time. The preliminary agenda includes item 9A, annual funding for Houston High School Fieldhouse. Item B, contract for GPS contract 1-year extension. Item C, contract extension for decorative street signs. Item D, payment for storm debris expenses. Item E, purchase for air compressor. Item F, purchase asphalt rejuvenation. Item G, purchase bulk concrete. Item H, purchase combination sewer cleaner. Item I, purchase for compact asphalt roller. Item J was moved actually, item J stayed on it, did it not? Item K moved. Item J, purchase manhole lining emergency sewer repair. Item K was moved to the regular agenda. That's purchase for repair to well number 9 at Johnson Road Water Treatment Plant. That will now be item 15 on the agenda, item 16 on the agenda. Item L, purchase replacement diesel exhaust system, and the one item that was moved from the regular agenda, item 15, change order number 9, GPAC Grove Outdoor Venue, is now item M. Is there a motion to accept the preliminary agenda as modified?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
All right, the preliminary agenda is approved. That brings us to the regular agenda this evening, and as was mentioned earlier, item 16 is now item 10A, Resolution 19R08, Apartment Moratorium. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. The 18-month moratorium on new apartments and apartments in the smart code area expired on July 8, 2019. During this period of time, staff from multiple city departments spent hundreds of hours analyzing the past and current data and making analytical and statistical projections on the impact apartments would have on city services in the future in the following areas: police and fire and EMS, public infrastructure, and the GMSD school system. On May 16, 2019, staff presented the 355-page report to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in a work session held at Fire Station Number 4. Given the board the opportunity to absorb the magnitude of the report, another work session was scheduled and was held with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on July 29, 2019. If you consider the above steps during the analysis of the impact of apartments would have upon the city, what was identified in the moratorium and the work that was requested of this body by city staff has been complete, and would say phase one of this has been completed. The resolution before you for consideration this evening, 19R08, is a separate resolution from the moratorium resolution initially passed in 18. As I mentioned, that has come to an end on July 8th, or that came to an end on July 8th. There are four key components of the resolution before the board for consideration, and this resolution was developed and drafted in this format based upon conversations that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen had amongst themselves during that work session on July 29th, the direction that staff received and input from city staff as well. So, as I said, there are five components to resolution number 19R08 before the board. The first is, and I mentioned what staff did in presenting to the board in those two work sessions was really phase one. We're now moving into phase two, which is what do we do with the information that's been presented in the study and considered by the board. So this resolution, first of all, asks that the Planning Commission consider amending Chapter 23 of the zoning of the city's Code of Ordinances to include the following changes. The first change, delete any provision for new standalone single-use apartment developments in the smart code zoning districts. Number two, any new apartment development in the smart code zoning districts should only be considered in vertically integrated mixed-use settings as a component of an integrated mixed-use development appropriately designed and scaled to its surroundings. Number three, establish smart growth design guidelines to minimize the impact on city services and create development projects that retain their value over time. Those were the four areas that were considered in this resolution. And then the fifth area for consideration to make this happen, to allow staff and the Planning Commission to do their due diligence, look at all these areas that were identified in the resolution. This resolution before you also considers imposing a 6-month moratorium, temporarily halting new applications for standalone single-use apartment developments within the smart code zoning districts. Mayor, myself, or city staff, we are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 19R08?
Move to approve.
It's a motion.
I thought you were going to say something else. Sorry. Yeah.
It's a short motion. There's a motion and a second. It's been moved and seconded. At this time, debate is limited to the merits of this motion. You may speak for or against the motion to the effect of its adoption or rejection. Is there any debate at this time? Alderman Sanders.
Mayor, I'd like to make some amendments to this motion. I have three that I've passed out to the board. I think they should be taken separately, though, so I would offer my first motion at this time.
Go ahead.
Paragraph 7, I would like to strike through the words for standalone, single-use apartment developments in the Smart Code zoning districts, and insert the words, "and the processing of applications for apartments and apartment building development, including any locations within the mixed-use projects or planned developments in the Smart Code zoning districts." Also, in paragraph 10, strike through the words, "for standalone, single-use apartment developments in the Smart Code zoning districts," and insert the words, and the processing of applications for apartment and apartment building developments, including any locations within mixed-use projects or planned developments in the Smart Code zoning district.
You bring that forward in the form of a motion.
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
And clerk, you have this wording, do you not? Thank you. So we're taking them one at a time. It's been properly moved, motioned, and seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Alderman Sanders.
Yes, I just want the board to know the purpose of this motion and this wording is the night we met in our work session, it was my intention to extend the current moratorium as it was. This language that I'm adding after we strike the new words or language in this resolution is the exact wording that was in the original resolution when the moratorium was put in place. So it's nothing other than getting the moratorium back to the original moratorium that we had 18 months ago. So that's the purpose of this motion. I respectfully request that you adopt this tonight.
Thank you, Alderman Sanders. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
No.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
No.
Alderman Yonda.
The amendment fails. You still have the floor, and you had two other motions.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that in paragraph 9, within bullet point number 2, we strike through or delete the words, "or as a component of integrated mixed-use development appropriately designed and scaled to its surroundings."
Bring that forward in the form of a motion, correct?
I'm sorry, could you say that just
Yes,
one
sir.
more time, Alderman Sanders?
Yes, I move that in paragraph 9, within bullet point number 2, we strike through or delete the words, "or as a component of an integrated mixed-use development appropriately designed and scaled to its surroundings."
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Discussion on this particular amendment. Alderman Sanders?
Yes, Mayor, the reason I've asked for this amendment to the motion is so I believe we're complying with what we discussed at our work session, that we look at vertically integrated mixed-use settings. At the time of our work session, I made several comments that I believed that the apartment building at Thornwood, currently as it stands, in my opinion, would be a standalone apartment building. Not the ones that are over the Market Row, but the residences. I thought at the time that several aldermen agreed, so I brought this motion forward tonight to reflect that.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Vice Mayor.
I have a question to Mr. Ross.
Mr. Ross, if you could come forward, Director.
And Mayor, I'll actually ask the question of you, and you can direct. The statement that the residences at Thornwood would be considered a single-use standalone, is that correct?
Director Ross, are there any formal planning definitions that involve standalone versus integrated versus mixed use?
No, sir. It's a portion of the overall project. It's a phase. It wasn't the first phase. It was the fourth phase of the project, and it's an apartment building, which is an approved building type within the SMART code.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
It is.
Any other discussion? Alderman Owens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I tend to agree to some extent with Alderman Sanders in that I, too, would like to see multifamily as a component of a vertically integrated mixed-use development. I'd prefer not to see any standalone, and I understand what Mr. Ross is telling us. However, I don't want to saddle the Planning Commission with that restriction. I would like the Planning Commission to take a look at that, and I don't want to include it as a part of this resolution, but that will be, my intention will be to bring that into the discussion at the Planning Commission level, and not only that, but also possibly to limit consider a cap on multifamily percentage as a component of a mixed-use development. And so, Alderman Sanders, I appreciate you bringing this forward. I will not be in support of this resolution, but I will be bringing that forward to discuss at the Planning Commission when we move forward.
Alderman Yonda.
Just a point of information, Mayor. This is a resolution. We're sort of passing it on to the Planning Commission. It then comes back to us, correct?
Any final recommendations that would be yes? Yes.
Just want to make that clear that this is not in stone. Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Alderman Sanders.
Thank you. I appreciate the previous speaker's comments, but the purpose of my amendment for this bullet point number 2 is because we're asking the Planning Commission to do these 3 things listed in this resolution. And within bullet point 2, it says that they should only consider vertically integrated mixed use or as a component of an integrated mixed-use development appropriately designed to scale to its surroundings. So that's the reason I was trying to strike that language, I might point out. So it would be vertically integrated mixed use only and not as a component such as what we see at Thornwood. And again, I encourage my colleagues to vote yes for this amendment.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
No.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
No.
Alderman Yonda?
No.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
The amendment fails. You have a third amendment?
Yes, sir, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that in paragraph 9 on the second page, we insert bullet point number 4, define standalone and single-use apartment developments.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Discussion? Alderman Owens. Alderman Sanders, that'll be fine.
Thank you. I just, again, since we may have varying opinions of what a standalone apartment building is or a single-use apartment development, I thought it was prudent to ask the Planning Commission to consider defining that in our ordinance so we would know what their opinion is of a building such as the residences at Thornwood, whether that constitutes a standalone apartment building or not.
Alderman Owens. Appreciate you bringing that forward. I totally support it. Any other discussion? Please call the roll on Amendment 3.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes. Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Motion carries. That amendment stands. We return to the original resolution. Any further discussion? Alderman Owens.
Yes, Mayor, thanks. I've got a lot of notes and a lot of thoughts, and I thank the folks. I see a lot of people who were at the work session who have come back out here today, and they heard my thoughts, and I don't know if I don't know if I want to go into a whole lot of details. I know that there are people who disagree with me, and I understand that, and I appreciate some of those emails and the reports bringing to our residents. I'll try well, I've got 5 minutes, so I guess I'll just, I'll say, I've said this before, and I continue to say this. I support mixed-use projects that adhere to the principles of smart growth development, smart development. I believe that our gateway areas and central business districts, in our central business district, we can create special places that will last for centuries and create great value for our city. I believe that mixed-use developments do create community and a sense of place in a limited capacity. I would not put these developments everywhere. I think we've got to put them in our gateways and in our central business districts so it does protect our existing neighborhoods. There's a myriad of mixed-use development examples that I could give you. Alpharetta City Center, Norton Commons in Louisville, Seaside, Florida, Harbor Town right here. Anyways, you can Google it and find out anything you want to find out about mixed-use developments and smart code and urban design and neo-traditional planning. But I think we have to realize that a development like this is incredibly complex. It's an incredibly complex endeavor that requires a master developer. It requires the right mix of uses, and that includes retail, that includes office, that includes single family, and that includes multifamily. And density in some capacity and small capacity, in my belief, is required to support some of these developments. It's required to keep these developments vibrant, to keep them safe, and necessary to bring in the retail component that we are all appreciative of, at least I think we are. Smart growth development, or at least mixed-use development that incorporates multifamily, requires open spaces for gathering. It requires, and I'm talking about quality here, mixed-use development. It requires upscale architecture. It requires landscaping that is cultivated and upscale. And that, in my opinion, and based on my experience, can create long-lasting, value-driven community. Now, I'll just say this, because I've got not that much time left. This is not just my vision, and I don't think it's just any of the board's vision. Many of you know, but this is a vision that was shared by hundreds of people who worked on our smart growth ordinance when it was developed. We did not pull this out of a hat. We had input from stakeholders, citizens, elected officials, city staff, and many, many, many residents. They, like me, realize that we have limited land left in Germantown, and if we're going to desire to continue to have the type of services that we expect in Germantown, and that's, everyone knows, our award-winning parks, our ISO rating #1 fire department, our police second to none, our ambulance service, and our schools, very expensive, that we've got to develop in a somewhat concentrated manner in these areas and in our central business district. And if we do that, then we can increase our commercial tax base, our sales tax, and place less of a tax on our residential property tax, which is the goal for the long haul. I believe we've got to grow with some amount of density in these areas to sustain our city. Mixed-use developments done correctly require some form of multifamily use that will help support the developments. As I mentioned, they create safety, vibrancy, and make these places desirable. I will reserve the balance of my comments for the next round.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion? Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the board considering my 3 motions earlier. I'm disappointed that motion 1 and 2 did not pass, but thank you for your help on my 3rd motion. I'm disappointed that we could not get, that I was not able to convince you of my other 2 motions, because technically, or looking at this resolution before us, I think the only thing it does now is temporarily halts new applications for standalone, single-use apartment developments in the smart code zoning districts. It does ask them to look at other provisions of our code of ordinances, but it allows for applications to be accepted tomorrow for apartments within our smart code zoning districts when we don't even know. We've asked them, you helped me ask them to define standalone and single use, but we're going to now allow, beginning tomorrow, the way I read it, that applications can be accepted unless they are new applications for standalone, single-use developments in the smart code districts. So I'm not sure I'll be able to, I struggle now whether I should support this resolution or not. I truly believe that our residents in Germantown do not want any more apartments. They're, for whatever reason. During the last year, I spoke to numerous residents, and by far the majority oppose new apartments in Germantown. I know that we've looked at a lot of data. I appreciate everything the city staff's done to look at the various aspects of apartments affecting our infrastructure and our resources in the city. But we've spent a large amount of taxpayer dollars to prepare for dense development in Germantown, and the majority, I would say, of emails I've received or people I've spoken with, less than 10% that I've spoken with were for new apartments. I have only received 1 or 2 emails, I believe, of people that support new apartments in Germantown. I've received a lot of emails from folks that say they do not want any more apartments. So I've tried to do what I could to try to strengthen the resolution to give us more time to look at that. I suppose every little bite at the apple that I can take, I should do it. As one of my colleagues here stated, after the Planning Commission looks at our ordinances and brings back some changes for us, I hope, I promise you there'll be a chance, and I will try to look at that, weigh it as for what the citizens would want to see in Germantown, and I will do my best to make any amendments or changes to the ordinances that they bring to us at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion?
Mayor.
Alderman Massey.
Thanks. So the reason that I am uncomfortable with the moratorium as it's been written is that it gives the illusion of protecting citizens from more new apartments. In fact, it specifically encourages developers to build more new apartments. The administration is simply doing what smart growth was intended to do all along, which was to prohibit standalone apartments. So this very thing really was implemented in the original Smart Growth Code in 2007. Now, at the time, it only applied to the Smart Growth Business District, which was a small district near City Hall. In 2013, the city of Germantown elected to expand what was known as smart growth into a concept known as the Smart Code. It was at that point that the protections of smart growth began to break down. I believe that the breakdown occurred as a result of a number of conflicts of interest and just poor planning. It is my opinion that there should be a full and fair independent investigation into the manner in which the Smart Code was adopted and approved in 2013 and then implemented from that time through today. Now, when we were deliberating on the original moratorium in January of 2018, the city attorney David Harris said the proposed moratorium would give the BMA the opportunity to make changes to the zoning ordinances. He specifically said one of the functions of the 18-month moratorium was to allow for the analysis and take any proposed changes through the zoning process. However, what happened is the administration allowed the 18-month moratorium to expire in July 2019 without further discussion by this body. We were never given the opportunity to come up with the zoning changes. I myself presumed that we would be able to come back as a body, as this board, as your elected representatives, and recommend those changes. and have public deliberations on those changes rather than having them in a small session, work session, where no votes are allowed to be conducted. And there's no clear record of actually what Alderman Sanders wanted to do or any other alderman wanted to do during that work session. We really don't know what came out of that work session and what everybody agreed upon. In fact, we're not sure if there was even supposed to be agreements made during a work session rather than a formal regular session of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Having said that, what it was represented to the elected representatives, your aldermen, and what was represented to the public was that we would accomplish these tasks within that 18-month moratorium. It was not your fault that the administration allowed that moratorium to expire without further discussion, and in some ways, it was the fault of the BMA for not forcing that issue to a vote sooner. But we didn't realize that on the last BMA meeting, prior to the expiration of the moratorium's prior to the expiration of the moratorium, that meeting would be canceled. Therefore, there was no opportunity at the very last meeting, prior to the expiration of the apartment moratorium, for us to even have that discussion. It is my opinion that the moratorium should be carried forward exactly as it was written originally, which is essentially what Alderman Sanders was attempting to accomplish in his amendments. And that's what we should do today, because it's what we promised the public. So we can extend the original moratorium, or adopt it as it was written then, carry it forward another 6 months, and begin the process of rewriting the SMART code, because that is exactly what needs to happen. We have strayed too far from the principles of smart growth. And when you hear Alderman Owens talking about the principles of smart growth, he knows that we deviated from the principles of smart growth that were designed to provide true walkable communities that make sense for a community and are designed to protect us. What we have is a plan that was a density for profit plan that has gone off the rails. We have to regain control of that plan, and we can do that over the next 6 months. But we don't need to punt the issue back. We don't need to punt that issue back to the unelected members of the Planning Commission. It has to start here with your elected representatives. So with that, I would make a motion, Mayor, that we adopt the language of the original moratorium and simply extend that another 6 months to give this board an opportunity to meet in a regular session and begin the process of rewriting the SMART code.
The Alderman Sanders amendments address that. So, I mean, that question has been settled.
Mayor, I don't believe that question has been settled. Alderman Sanders did not ask for us to vote on that original moratorium.
Your point is well taken. If you'd like to restate your motion, have you have it written or prepared?
I do not have a written amendment prepared, but I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, we are really just taking.
Well, just clearly state it. You don't have to explain it. Clearly state your motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the language of the original moratorium and extend it for 6 months.
February 12th, 2020.
I think that'll be fine, Mayor.
Would you just put that in the form of a substitute motion? Would that be fine? That's what the parliamentarian has suggested.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
A substitute resolution for the resolution that was brought forward.
Yeah.
Clerk, you were able to get that, I think. Were you not? Okay. There is a motion by Alderman Massey. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mayor.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Could you read the motion?
Be difficult. Substitute or adopt language of original moratorium and extend it to February the 12th of 2020.
No.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
No.
Alderman Yonda?
No.
The substitute resolution fails. We return to the original motion. Any further discussion? Alderman Yonda.
It's my first time, right?
You are correct.
Okay, good. I don't see anything, I disagree with both of the aldermen who spoke against this resolution. I think it does exactly what we want it to. I think that a developer would be crazy to come forward with apartments of any type at this point in the city of Germantown. This does not mean that someone's going to start building apartments tomorrow. In my conversations with Mr. Ross, it takes 6 to 18 months before anything can be started on something like that. So I think we're in pretty good shape with this resolution. I do agree with the smart code that we currently have. I don't believe that it was made for profit. In fact, as I know it wasn't made for profit, and I think that's an insulting to the citizens that put it together by an alderman. I'm sorry, this resolution does exactly what it needs to do and will do, and I can assure you that there's not going to be any apartments showing up here that stand alone for sure, based on the rhetoric that we're getting from the alderman, and it's not something that's going to happen, so I'm not worried about it. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion?
Sure, Mayor.
Alderman Massey.
I think by removing the safeguards that were included in the original 2018 apartment moratorium, and then asking the citizens to wait for the Planning Commission to come up with ideas about how we can prevent more apartments in the city and protect the citizens. We're putting the cart before the horse. I think we need to come up with the solutions before we allow the moratorium to expire, because in fact that is what we promised the citizens that we were going to do. It was the failure of the administration to allow us to have those conversations before the moratorium expired that resulted in this new moratorium where the protective safeguards have been removed. The reality is that there really are not many more development or land or property within Germantown where a standalone apartment could be developed. So everything's going to be incorporated into a mixed-use development. And so by stating that we are going to encourage developers to incorporate apartments into mixed-use developments, we're essentially saying that any new smart growth development that comes online can have apartments. That's what this resolution is saying. So by adopting this resolution, I mean, in many respects, we're voting for more new apartments, and it puts me in a very precarious position tonight, because you have a moratorium that is going to be represented in the press as an apartment moratorium, when in fact it's not an apartment moratorium at all. And allows developers to build more new apartments. The only difference is that they're not allowing standalone apartments, and we're not even sure what the definition of a standalone apartment is. So they'll just, the administration, planning commission just gets to make up those rules as they go along. There's no protective safeguards built into this apartment, what they're calling the apartment resolution anymore. It's been gutted. But if I vote against it tonight, then you have the headlines that are going to read Massey votes against the apartment moratorium. So you see how difficult this is tonight. And I'm sorry. I am so very sorry that I was not able to do more to prevent this from happening and to build a case in support of completely rewriting the smart code. Because believe me when I say this to you, that is where the problem lies. All of those charrettes and the things that were done to sell smart growth to the city originally were based on something completely different than what you received in 2013 when the city decided to expand the density plan to other areas of the city. So today we have 2 pending projects in Forest Hill Heights with hundreds of apartments. So you have Viridian and you have Watermark. Watermark is pending litigation. So I won't get into the details of those issues, but we may very well have 2 standalone apartments in Forest Hill Heights. Carrefour, which is the Cannon project, I don't think ever intended to incorporate standalone apartments. I think from the very beginning they were going to incorporate a true mixed-use development. In Thornwood, to some extent, I think the attempt was to incorporate some mixed use. But we need to have all of this figured out. We need to have our rules in place before developers start filing applications and wanting to build more apartments. And right now, we just don't have the rules in place. We're breaking down the rules and opening up the floodgates once again for developers to interpret and create and find ways
15 seconds.
to incorporate more new apartments. And frankly, we really just don't know what the impact of new apartments is going to be on your lives.
Thank you, Alderman Massey. That concludes your time on the floor. Further discussion? Please call the roll on the motion as amended. I'm sorry.
Yes, I have.
Alderman Owens.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Just for a point of fact, I guess I'll look to Mayor. I'll ask you.
Sure.
It's my understanding that the watermark has been dismissed.
Well, I'll defer to our city attorney, but that's pretty much accurate. Go ahead if you want to give the exact definition.
There are no apartments approved in that location.
No, and they're just withdrawing all opposition to what the board did and going on their way.
Thank you. I take some exception to my colleagues.
Point of order.
Yes, what's your point of order?
Clarification, Alderman, if you'll just give me some leeway here. So what were the stipulations in that case? I know there were stipulations.
As I understand it, they're just tired of spending money and they're dropping the lawsuit.
But generally, but if it was reported that there was stipulation, I presume that they agreed to dismiss the lawsuit with stipulations. So what were the stipulations?
I have not read that document.
Alderman, we put that document in your box, and it's pretty much the document that was filed, the one-page document, correct?
I'll review it.
Thank you. Continue, Alderman Owens.
So just my belief is that the smart growth and the smart code is not broken. That is a false statement. I don't think it's based in reality. I think it does contain provisions that restrict, that are applicable to smart growth developments. It is a zoning code, and it has served us well, and I would present Thornwood as a good example of that. And so I'll say this and close. As a planner, as a citizen, I've been living here for 45 years. I had a lot of emails with people who tell me how long they live. I love this city. I care about this city. I would never do anything that I felt would hurt this city. But I believe that based on the data showed in our moratorium report, that I can support some multifamily residential, and it doesn't have to be apartments, but condos and a smart growth zoning district, as long as it is part of an integrated mixed-use development application appropriately designed and scaled to its surrounding. I've said this before. I know you guys are tired of hearing me. I probably sound like a broken record. But I've stated I do think we need to restrict standalone apartments. I think we need to research design guidelines that will better help the multifamily components of mixed-use development sustain themselves and sustain value. And I think that's what the resolution before us directs the Planning Commission to do. I've tried to express, if I could, the need for multifamily in a mixed-use development, and whether that's condos or apartments or duplexes, needs to be some form of density to support the retail, to support the office, to create the vibrancy that we desire, at least that I desire, and the folks who, the hundreds of residents who participated in the smart growth development desired. I'll give you an example. Thornwood is less than 30 acres. The city is approximately 12,500 acres. When it is complete, and that includes Somerset, the single-family residential development, It's going to produce approximately $1.5 million in total tax revenues. The 20-year debt, just to give you an example, the 20-year debt service on Forest Hill Elementary is $1.45 million. I'll just let that sink in for a second. The developer requested no financial tools like a TIF or a pilot and paid for all the infrastructure. Thornwood won a statewide Rebuild Tennessee Award in 2018. 5 restaurants are planned for Thornwood development. This is a crown jewel, and we can have more of these crown jewels in our city. This is what we need. This is the type of quality development that we need, and it would not have been developed without the multifamily component of that. I am passionate about this, and I hope some of you can understand why I'm passionate as a future development for our city, because I think it can sustain our city into the future and not detract or provide problems or issues and still protect our residential neighborhoods. So with that said, I would encourage my colleagues to support this resolution.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Please call the roll on the motion as amended.
Alderman Owens,
I'm sorry, this is your...
No, this is the original motion.
Original motion.
The original motion on the table
I vote yes.
as amended by and approved.
By Alderman Sanders' amendment. I vote yes. Thank you. I'm confused.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Though it's not as strong as I'd like to see it, it does halt some apartment applications, so I'll vote yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
The motion carries. The administration is pleased to take your orders and move this forward through Planning Commission and through Economic and Community Development. That brings us to item 10B on the agenda, which was formerly item 10. That's ordinance number 20. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of folks that are here for that last item. You're welcome to stay for the entire board meeting, but if you'd like to quietly leave at this time, you may do so and enjoy dinner. Ordinance 2019-11, Amendment to Fire Prevention Ordinance, Chapter 10, third and final reading. Chief Selberg, are you starting the presentation, Chief? Okay, Chief and Fire Marshal Dwyer.
Fire Marshal Dwyer will be assisting me. He's my expert on most of this. Thank you, Mayor and Alderman. This agenda item is to adopt a new fire code for the city of Germantown. It will be based upon the 2015 edition of the International Fire Code with our local amendments. During the second reading and public hearing, some questions and comments were presented. Following that meeting, we provided some supplemental information to the board for their consideration. Some of the highlights of that information are, in regards to the limit on dead-end streets of 750 feet, some options might be to provide sprinkler protection for the buildings to allow extending the roadway, such as you saw in the amendment presented by Alderman Owens. The only thing I would suggest you consider is possibly putting a limit on that if they are sprinklers, so we don't have just no limit. Additionally, we have worked with developers in the past to provide a loop system that helps limit the actual dead end. An example of this is Devonshire, in which a connection was made to Bedford Plantation to provide a loop system. This assures access even for EMS and police, in addition to fire. In regards to the 96-foot requirement for cul-de-sacs, this is a standard fire code requirement in most municipalities around the area and the country, although this isn't always reflected in their subdivision requirements. While Germantown includes the fire marshal's office in the review of residential subdivisions, this isn't always the case in other jurisdictions. However, when included, the fire marshal normally requires the 96 feet. The 96-foot requirement has been standard in Germantown for several years. We're attempting to coordinate this requirement with the subdivision regulations so that it is clear for both commercial and residential developments. The 96-foot width is provided to allow the turn radius of our larger fire trucks, as well as allow for adequate positioning of vehicles for firefighting. There was also discussion about allowing pavers or other drivable surface in the center of the cul-de-sac. This is possible, such as what was done recently in Chapel Cove and Glen Echo Cove. And contrary to other statements, Chapel Cove cul-de-sac is actually 97 feet from back of the curb to the back of the curb. Since they used a roll curb, this can be used as drivable surface for fire apparatus. This updated fire code will help us meet the Germantown Forward 2030 objective of fire prevention activities that result in low dollar loss and low injuries and death from fire through fire code enforcement, as well as assuring safe commercial buildings through fire code. Additionally, this updated fire code will allow the city to request exemption from the state fire marshal's office for certain commercial buildings where they would only have to be approved by the Germantown fire marshal's office rather than both the state and Germantown. This will result in significant money and time savings for developers. Fire Marshal Dwyer and I are available for questions.
Thank you, Chief. Is there a motion to approve on third and final reading ordinance 2019-11, amendment to Chapter 10 of the Municipal Code, Germantown Fire Prevention Ordinance? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion. There's a motion and a second. Floor is open for debate or amendments. Alderman Owens.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. I just, as I passed out an executive session and discussed at length in executive session a couple of amendments that I was proposing with regards to this Chapter 10 or section. The first one is Section 503.2.5, including dead ends, in which we talked about, and Chief admirably talked about, the cul-de-sac width. This is no secret. I've talked about this at just about every meeting. From a planning perspective, from a maintenance perspective, from a runoff perspective, from an aesthetic perspective, I just feel like 90 foot is a very large diameter cul-de-sac, and to extend it, I know it just is an additional 3 feet on each side, but I would prefer to leave the 90-foot diameter of unobstructed width. And then the second amendment that I have, and these are all outlined in the amendment that I passed out, that the dead-end street shall be no longer than 750 feet unless homes on said street are protected with fire sprinkler systems and/or an alternate access drive is provided. I'd also say up to a maximum of 1,000 feet as an amendment to that. Is that what you were talking about, Chief, adding, so it's not open-ended, I guess? What do the subdivision regulations say right now? 12, okay.
Is 1,200 accurate? Director Ross, where are you? Is that correct? Yes. Thank you.
All right, I would modify that to 1,200 feet then. And that's if sprinkler protected. And then the only other amendments would be that Appendix D and any other portions of the code that I did not mention should be amended to reflect or match this language. And that would be my motion, Mayor.
Alderman Owens, you have 3 amendments in this particular agenda item, or 2? Is that?
I believe it's just 2 in this agenda item, and then 1 in the next agenda item, and then 1
Okay.
following.
Let's take those separately. So could you restate your first amendment, and then we'll see if there's a second.
Yes, a motion to approve on third and final reading ordinance 2019-11, amendment to Chapter 10 of the Municipal Code, Germantown Fire Prevention Ordinance with the following exceptions. From Section 503.2.5, dead ends, dead-end fire apparatus access roads in excess of 150 feet in length shall be provided with a cul-de-sac 90 feet, changing from 96 to 90 feet in diameter of unobstructed width.
That's Amendment 1, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's a motion and a second. Any debate on Amendment 1?
One question, and then I'll be quiet.
Sure, go ahead.
Fire Marshal Dwyer, I understand we can, within that 90 feet, we can't have any, it has to be all hard surface, doesn't it?
Fire Marshal, go ahead.
Mayor, with that, it's you can actually have pavers that break that up. It's a drivable surface or an engineered surface. It can be grass, bricks.
So you could put grass in there as long as it had pavers. Okay, all right. So we currently do that. All right.
It's been motioned and second. Discussion. Go ahead, Alderman Sanders.
I just have a question, Mayor.
Sure.
Appendix D is what we're looking at. I think there's several options. It appears that it can be a 96 diameter, 96-foot diameter cul-de-sac, a 60-foot Y, a hammerhead, 120-foot hammerhead, and there's also an alternative to the hammerhead. Is that correct?
The amendment calls for defines cul-de-sac.
correct. I understand the amendment, though, changes from 96 to 90, but there are other options. Is that not correct? It's not only a 96-foot cul-de-sac.
That are currently in the code or in this, I guess, what you're bringing forward in the appendix?
Yes, Mayor, there are other options.
Okay.
But are those allowed, I'm
So-
sorry if I'm out of order, but are those allowed by the subdivision regulations? Those types of,
Mr. Ross, why don't you come forward and be part of the team?
the Y and the hammerhead?
Those are generally included in the fire marshal and fire department's comments, and so in essence, they are allowed. It's part of the design discussion at the technical advisory committee.
I'm sorry. Shouldn't count.
All right, let's stick back to decorum. Alderman Sanders?
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry.
I just didn't want my time to be running for my colleague. It appears even a 60-foot Y, if I was a developer or a developer wanted to have that dead-end street, even that would allow for that particular lot at the end of that street to be larger, it appears to me. So if these options are available, in addition to the 96-foot cul-de-sac, are there any other options that you are aware of? There's none that I read in the code. So thank you. I did meet with you guys last week, and I appreciate the time that you took. I did go out and look at those two coves that we've mentioned. I also spoke with our economic development director, and I asked a question in the last 2 years, 2017 and 18, how many streets or subdivisions were developed that this would have been required, and I apologize, Mayor, I don't remember if it was 3 or 4 that I was told about. If Mr. Ross could address that for me.
Do you have how many?
Mr. Mayor, it was 3. It was Goodwin Farms, Oldfield Green, and the review of CARE4's outline plan.
Thank you.
So I think since we have other options available to the developer of these streets and subdivisions, I don't see it necessary to make this change from 96 to 90 feet since we have other options. So thank you for the time of presenting the motion and preparing it, but I don't think I'll be able to support it.
Any more discussion on the amendment? Vice Mayor?
Just a question, and Mr. Ross, this may be something that you've already kind of gone over in our conversations, and again, appreciate the Fire Marshal and Chief meeting with us all for those of us that wanted to meet last week. The math on this additional, that 660 feet that we're talking about, under 900 square feet, correct?
Yes, ma'am, 877 square feet. To go from, it would be an additional 877 square feet to go from 90 to
96. I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Alderman Owens.
Mayor,
Go ahead. I did. I went first. Yes,
I think we're still in the first round. I haven't
That's
spoken.
fine. Well, if you'd like the floor, go right ahead.
Sure, thank you. So what are the consequences if we don't adopt the amendments, either in the ordinance as proposed by the administration or as proposed by Alderman Owens? In other words, if we just continue to operate under the ordinance as it exists today, and let me tell you why I'm asking. There seems to be so much lack of clarity on this issue, and I haven't heard anyone come forward with a particularly good case for justifying any of these ordinances, quite frankly. And so from my perspective, generally when government doesn't have a very good justification for changing the laws, it probably means you shouldn't go forward with making those changes, particularly where there is some lack of clarity among the legislative body who is going to be approving those laws. So explain to me what happens if we simply go forward from tonight with the ordinance unamended.
Chief, if you'd like to review your presentation, I think you answered a lot of that in that, but go right ahead over the first two readings.
Well, I believe what you're asking is if we weren't to adopt this new updated fire code. That would create a lot of issues with our ability, first off, to ask for exemption from the state. So all these developers would have to continue to go to the state for approvals on their plans and their developments. This would also hurt us in our ISO rating because we must have a code that's adopted within so many years of the state code in order for us to be able to utilize it and follow it.
Thank you, Chief.
But why can't we simply adopt the code as it is written without the amendments? Because if you're saying that we have to adopt the code as it's come down from the state, I suppose, yet we're proposing amendments, we're defeating that purpose. You either can amend this or you can't. Is it just a matter of adopting a fire code? And if so, why can't we simply adopt the current code that we have and say that we've adopted a code and you still be able to give the approvals at the local level?
Chief?
Essentially, when you can adopt a fire code, but you do the amendments to address your specific situations. Normally, a state code doesn't include most of those amendments because the state doesn't respond to you. So they allow you to address those specific amendments on how you are going to respond in your community, the size of your community, those characteristics of your community. So they're not going to dictate those specific amendments. So that's what we do, is we provide those specific things for us. We do have many of these items already in the old codes, but we're trying to bring them all into the new to make it more consistent.
So the state allows for, in essence, local control, and because no two fire departments are the same and no two communities are exactly the same.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I might add that also we have someone here with us from the National Fire Sprinkler Association, Mr. Gary West, who is actually here for the next item, but he is the past fire marshal for the state of Tennessee, if he might be any assistance with your questions.
Sure. Continue, Alderman. You have
Point
the
of
floor.
inquiry, Mayor, or clarification maybe.
Yes.
When you said amendments, do you mean appendix, or is an amendment such as the amendment Alderman Owens is making?
There's the amendment that Alderman Owens has brought forward, and then there are amendments to the fire code, correct? As part of the appendices? And
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Essentially both of them.
Yes.
Your specific amendments and those appendices that are basically to provide that specific information.
Alderman Massey?
So, Chief, if one of the aldermen then makes a motion to amend the amendment, or makes a motion to substitute the existing ordinance for the amended ordinance, we have adopted a fire code, and so would that allow you to continue with local control?
Chief?
Essentially, your fire code is, by the state, is a minimum standard. So if we lower a standard that is required by the state, that could put us in jeopardy of losing our exemption. However, the appendices is not something that's adopted by the state, so we have more control over that locally.
Thank you, Chief. Alderman?
I'll yield my time.
Thank you. Alderman Owens?
Yes, so because the three amendments that we have before us are integrated, including the subdivision regulations, this question is in reference to my colleague Alderman Sanders' question before with reference to the Y and the hammerhead and the alternative hammerhead. Mr. Ross, it is my belief, I don't think that the subdivision regulations would allow us to utilize any of those. As a matter of fact, I believe it requires a 90-foot or 96-foot curb-to-curb turnaround and would not permit such a type of roadway.
Director Ross?
When it relates to the subdivision regs, you are correct, Mayor, to the Alderman. But when you're looking at a dead-end street, which the subdivision regs also regulate, that's where the Y and the hammerhead come into play. So Just saying it as it is, it depends on the context of the situation.
Okay, fair enough. One more question, Mayor.
Sure.
Have we ever developed a subdivision that has had a 60-foot Y, a hammerhead, that you're aware of? Or, I mean, these other things don't really pertain because they're clearance around a fire hydrant, and well, there's another alternative. I just, in my experience, we've always used cul-de-sacs.
Director?
Mayor, to the Alderman, we have always used cul-de-sacs, but that's not to say that in the limited amount of land that we have left and the strange-sized parcels that we have left, that that option might not be of interest to someone if it's a long, skinny parcel.
And so it would seem that we would need to modify our subregs to include these additional Y and hammerhead.
Or it could fall under the variance process that's allowed for within the subregs.
Fair enough.
There is a mitigation process that any developer can choose to ask for relief. Yes.
And I appreciate that, too. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Mayor.
Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, one of the previous speakers was asking, could we not just re-adopt or adopt the previous code that we had, but I believe we have to adopt a code that is within 7 years of what the state has. So does the current code, would that even be possible to do, to keep the current code and allow us to continue to ask for those exemptions and
Chief?
be in compliance?
No, sir. And that also, that old code would not be consistent with the county building code, so we'd have a lot of conflicts.
Thank you, Chief.
So we do need a code then with a more current year. Is
Go
that
ahead.
correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Alderman Massey?
Mayor, do you know if Alderman Owens was able to work with home builders on his amendments, and if they gave any recommendations? Would you mind inquiring?
I have no idea, Alderman Massey.
Would you, I just generally address questions through the chair. If you would like, I'll ask the question directly to Alderman Owen.
The alderman can elect to answer. Go ahead. He's had his time on the floor. That's really up to him if he'd like.
I don't want to yield the floor, but if he wouldn't mind answering, I would like to get the answer from him.
I believe we all received an email from the homeowners that stipulated some of what they would like to see. And the only provision, I think, well, a couple of provisions, I guess, from that were the 90-foot turnaround and the there was an additional, I think it was the 5,500 square foot for sprinklers.
Alderman Massey?
So have we been out of compliance then with the county regulations and the state for 7 years then? Why would we just now come back? I guess if we're out of compliance, why would we just now be doing this? I mean, if this is necessary, I understand the state requires us to do it every so often, but if there are provisions that are so out of compliance that it would create problems at the county level, why would we just now propose these changes?
Chief?
Essentially, because we're not exempt, we've been basically applying the state-adopted codes at this point. So this will give us the chance to have our own codes and request that exemption to do our own enforcement.
Thank you, Chief.
So I guess I was under the impression that we had been exempt, and so you're saying that we have not been exempt, so we have been having to use, get approval from the state?
Chief?
Yes, sir. We have not been exempt up till now.
Okay. So if we were to continue operating under the existing ordinances, then we would just be continuing to operate under the exact same scenario that we are today without the exemption.
Chief?
That's correct. And the state would basically be enforcing their code, and we would basically be working with them.
And that's what they're doing today, correct?
Correct.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll on Amendment 1.
Alderman Yonda,
Just so I'm clear, We're going from 96 to 90 is the amendment that we're talking about.
That is correct.
The answer is yes.
Alderman Sanders?
No.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
The First Amendment does move forward as part of the original motion. You had a second amendment. Would you like to go ahead and read that into the record?
Yes, thank you.
Or ask for a motion?
Thank you. I'd like to, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the provision, Section 503.2.51, maximum dead-end length, be amended to state dead-end streets shall be no longer than 750 feet unless homes on said street, up to a maximum of 1,200 feet, unless said homes on said street are protected with fire sprinkler systems and/or alternate access drive is provided. And the rest of the.
Thank you, Alderman. Is there a second?
Point of clarification, Mayor.
Sure.
I thought, and I may be wrong, but I thought that in the executive session, Alderman Owens said that he might want to have that no longer than 1,200 feet, but I might be recalling something incorrectly. I thought you were going to change the 750 to 1,200.
He just did. Did you not?
No longer than 150 feet, unless homes are protected with a fire sprinkler systems, but up to a maximum of 1,200 feet if they are protected. Maybe that wasn't as clear as it should be. And that was Chief's request, so it wasn't open-ended. In other words, we wouldn't want to have a street that was 4,000 feet long, and so dead-end streets shall be no longer than 750 feet unless homes on said street are protected with fire sprinkler systems and/or alternate access drive is provided up to a maximum of 1,200 feet.
Thank you. You brought that forward in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
The amendment has been approved. We return to the original amendment to approve on third and final reading ordinance 2019-11, amendment to Chapter 10 of the Municipal Code, Germantown Fire Prevention Ordinance, as properly amended. That has been moved forward in the form of a motion and seconded. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Wait, what are we voting on, Mayor? I'm sorry, this was his third
Voting on
amendment.
the original motion as amended.
So we're going back, not Alderman Owens' third motion, I guess, which will come in the next round. We're voting on the original.
Next presentation, next agenda item, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah, correct.
So with
Yep.
two amendments to this one, and then there's one with regards to sprinklers, which is coming up.
That's on item 11, though, correct?
Yes.
Good clarification. Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
The item passes as amended. We move to item 11 on the agenda, ordinance number 2019-12, amendment to the Fire Prevention Ordinance, Chapter 10, residential sprinklers, third and final reading. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor and Alderman. This agenda item will adopt the residential sprinkler requirements for the fire code. The requirements for fire sprinklers in commercial and multifamily buildings are already included within the 2015 International Fire Code. This amendment will update our current residential sprinkler requirements for 1- and 2-family dwellings. During the second reading and public hearing, some questions and comments were presented. Following that meeting, we provided supplemental information to the board for their consideration. Some of the highlights of that information are: first, a statement was made that smoke detectors and fire alarm systems are better than fire sprinkler systems. While you won't find a fire chief that tells you that smoke detectors aren't extremely important, there is a significant difference. A smoke detector or fire alarm system can only warn you of a fire. However, a fire sprinkler system can actually take measures to extinguish the fire. Contrary to what most people think, modern homes burn about 4 times faster than older homes due to the large amount of synthetic materials in the home. An example of this is a recent house fire in Collierville just before Christmas, in which the fire moved so fast that the fire overcame the occupants and killed 4 people, even though they had smoke detectors. For homes with a sprinkler system, a single sprinkler head can extinguish 90% of the fires prior to the arrival of the fire department. Yes, contrary to what you have seen on TV shows in which all the sprinklers activate, only those directly over the fire actually activate. This greatly reduces the amount of water and fire damage, as well as protecting the occupants. Examples of this are a couple of fires that we have had in Germantown in which the occupants had a fire while asleep and the sprinkler system put the fire out, sometimes without them even realizing they had a fire. We also provided some information regarding the recommendation of sprinkler homes over 5,000 square feet. This size of home presents additional risks to the occupants and firefighters due to the complex layout, the distance from exits, and the increased amount of concealed spaces. Additionally, ISO has additional requirements for water flow amounts and fire apparatus response for buildings that are over 4,800 square feet if they aren't sprinklered. As you know, Germantown is the only municipality in West Tennessee with a Class 1 ISO rating, and contrary to previous statements, Memphis is a Class 2. The question was asked about what other communities require residential sprinklers. Some nearby include Collierville, which requires 5,500 square feet for residential and 3,500 square feet for commercial. Arlington requires sprinklers for 5,000 square feet for both residential and commercial. Piperton requires them for all commercial and residential structures, although they do have a fire department with a combination paid and volunteer firefighters. Franklin has 5,000 square foot requirement for residential and commercial. Pleasant View requires it for all new commercial and residential structures, as well as Ashland City. Another fact was the cost for a residential sprinkler system is about $1.10 to $1.20 per square foot in the Germantown area. There's a representative from Security Fire Protection here that can answer any specifics about them if needed. They install many of the systems in this area. There are concerns about residential fire sprinkler systems freezing and bursting. The codes have specific standards for protecting these systems from freezing. This is also a top priority of our fire marshal's office during the installation inspections. Virtually all frozen sprinkler pipes have been due to modifications that removed the freeze protection, such as the insulation from the sprinkler system. An example of this was the commercial sprinkler pipe that froze at the Oral School for the Deaf, in which the HVAC company had done work in the attic and removed the insulation. Residential sprinkler systems have a much lower chance of breaking from freezing due to the installation process and extra precautions taken. We also provided information on the benefit provided by specific insurance companies in Tennessee for having a residential fire sprinkler system, which can be up to 10% off your insurance depending on the insurance company. A home fire sprinkler system is the only system that can actually provide fire suppression prior to the arrival of the fire department. These systems can be added to a new home fairly reasonably and provide protection for that whole family. This amendment will help ensure adequate life safety protection for our residents in these large homes and zero lot line homes. This helps meet the Germantown Forward 2030 objective of fire prevention activities that result in low dollar loss and low injuries and death from fire. Mr. Gary West and Mr. Brian Biggs of the National Fire Sprinkler Association are here tonight in case you'd like to ask any of them who are experts. Also, by the way, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. West was previously the state fire marshal, so he's quite familiar with fire codes and fire deaths in Tennessee. We also have Mr. Sheldon Dacus with us, who is with Security Fire Protection, and he was also on the NFPA 13 committee, which actually sets the standards for fire sprinklers in the country. And also I might mention that Fire Marshal Dwyer is with me, who also sits on the NFPA 72 committee, which sets the national standards for fire alarm systems. We're available for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Fire Marshal. Is there a motion to approve on third and final reading the amendment to the Fire Prevention Ordinance, Chapter 10 of the Municipal Code, Section 10-12, residential sprinkler requirements for one-family and two-family dwellings? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Alderman Owens, I think you had another amendment you wanted to bring forward.
Yes, Mayor, the hour's late. I'll be brief. My only amendment is a meager one, that we modify the sprinkler requirement from 5,000 to 5,500 square feet to match what Collierville is doing, and and to be competitive in that area. I appreciate, Mr. West and Mr. Dacus coming down probably a long way to be at our meeting. Appreciate your expertise being here, as well as Fire Marshal Dwyer, and we've had some good conversations, as well as the chief and I. Appreciate all the work that you've provided us. It's been extremely thorough, and I thank you for that.
You bring that forward in the form of a motion. It was handed out earlier and submitted to the clerk. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the amendment? Alderman Sanders.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question for our fire experts here at Germantown. I suppose you would be happy with any homes that became sprinkled, but do you see any issues with just the change from 5,000 square feet to 5,500?
Is that were directed to the chief, or
Well,
is that who you want answering the question, or the sprinkler folks?
Either one, Mayor.
All right. Chief?
Personally, I'm just concerned that there's more homes that are large homes that we won't be protecting in that 5,000 to 5,500 be my biggest concern. Also, the issue of the ISO requiring a higher fire flow for those larger homes, that there is the possibility that we could lose some points when ISO comes back and reevaluates us in the future.
Thank you, Chief.
Could you expand just a little bit about that on the ISO rating portion?
Chief?
I didn't quite understand that.
Mayor, to Alderman Sanders, the ISO requires a 4,800 square feet, or uses that as a benchmark. At 4,800 square feet, anything above that requires additional fire flow, which means a larger water main. Additional resources have to respond to that. And that's something that we're always trying to be aware of and considerate of, are the number of resources it takes for a residential fire. As you know, oftentimes, if it's more than a room and content fire, we call for mutual aid, which usually includes the county, Memphis, and Collierville. This would help eliminate some of that.
Thank you, Fire Marshal. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the additional information you gave us. I've read through all that. A lot of good points in there. I've received an email from one of our home builders and a phone call also concerned about this provision requiring the sprinklers. I do know at our previous reading, second reading I guess it was, one of my colleagues expressed that he would not want a sprinkler system in his home, but I was quite the opposite, was designing one that was less than 5,000 square feet and thought I would have one myself. But I appreciate this information that you've given us. Some of the myths were that or things that were discussed last meeting appear to be dispelled, in my opinion. I just want to say thank you and appreciate the time you've put in this matter.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion? Alderman Massey?
Chief, did this go before the Public Safety Education Commission?
Chief?
No, sir.
I think we're still on Alderman Owen's amendment, so I guess I'll reserve the remainder of my comments when we get back to the original motion.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
No.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
No.
The amendment carries 3-2, correct? We return to the original motion to approve on third and final reading the amendment to the Fire Prevention Ordinance, Chapter 10 of the Municipal Code, Section 10-12, residential sprinkler requirements for one-family and two-family dwellings as amended. It's been properly motioned and seconded and amended. Any further discussion? Alderman Massey.
So I want to speak briefly to the residents, because I think it should be pointed out that Chief Selberg is just doing his job. I mean, his job is to protect all of us from fires. And so he doesn't have to contemplate what it costs you. He doesn't have to contemplate how it's gonna affect home builders. He just wants to prevent fires and get them put out as fast as he possibly can. He should be admired for that. He's doing his job, doing what he's supposed to be doing. Now, having said that, it's our responsibility as your elected representatives to take in other factors, to consider other factors before we vote. So I felt compelled to support Alderman Owen's amendment to increase the square footage before a sprinkler system would be required. But I'm a conservative by nature, and my conservative principles generally cause me to steer away from additional government regulation. You know, in this case, I just don't believe that the administration has presented sufficient evidence to justify this kind of government interference with personal choice of home builders or home buyers, each of whom I think would likely agree that this ordinance is simply an overprotective regulation that unnecessarily expands the nanny state. You may not see that, but a lot of people will. A lot of people aren't going to want to spend the additional dollars to have a sprinkler system installed in their house. And I know there's insurance credits, but I can tell you from personal experience, whether it's commercial setting or residential setting, when you tell somebody that the cost of their home is going to go up because they have to install a sprinkler system, they don't want to do it most of the times. Occasionally you'll have somebody who will. But I contend that Germantown residents are well educated and capable of making their own decisions about the tools and equipment they choose to allow in their homes for the safety and security of their families. It's a personal decision. I think the other aldermen, if they support this, you have made a case. You have provided us with evidence. The Home Builders Association presented us with their own evidence. And in this case, I think that my vote against the amendment is actually going to reflect what the majority of our residents would support in Germantown. I just think it's a step too far for government to want to try to implement these kind of regulations. But thank you for your work and the time that you put into this.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Motion carries as amended. We move to item 12 on the agenda, Ordinance 2019-13, Amendment to Subdivision Ordinance, Chapter 17, Section 17-56, Streets, second reading, vote. Director Ross.
I'll be quick. In light of the discussions that occurred with the previous items, I think it may be prudent for us to move forward with modifications to reflect those as part of third reading.
Okay. So to reflect what was done in the prior two ordinances?
Yes, sir. So to reflect the change from 96 back to 90, which is where the subregs currently existed prior to Planning Commission making that change, and then to add in the additional language for the extension, those requirements of sprinkled beyond 750 feet, as well as the drive access to be included as part of that.
And Mayor, I believe that's all contained in the ordinance 2019-11 that was previously two items passed that this board adopted. To Mr. Ross's point, we can go back and have this
For third and final.
third and final
Gotcha.
amended that way.
We'll just pull that language forward.
All right, so this evening we can go ahead and accept the motion that's in front of us. And then on third and final, it'll have all of the modifications from items 11 and 12.
Just 11, but
Oh,
yes,
just
sir.
11, okay. All right, good, thank you. Board, hopefully you understood that. Is there a motion to approve on second reading ordinance 2019-13, amendment to section 17, streets of the subdivision ordinance in the municipal code?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
We're taking this forward for a third vote,
Third and
correct?
final reading.
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Motion carries, moves to third and final reading. Brings us to item 13 on the agenda, change orders number 1 and 2, emergency sanitary sewer repairs. Director Mills.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor, and Board. Talk a little sanitary sewer on the emergency side as we move forward. You'll remember that we had a 36-inch sanitary sewer line at 8082 Farmingdale that we have been repairing over the last few weeks. On July the 8th, Administrator Lawton declared this an emergency situation, and you as a board acted in that fashion on July 22nd, ratifying the emergency repair contract with White Construction Company Incorporated for $287,800. White Construction began work on July 11th, and I shared with you at that time of the ratification that we were pretty certain that there would be change orders, and we have a couple to bring to you tonight. Change order number 1 covers associated work to change the bypass pumping location and to restore the yard at 8071 Stonewick Road. The second change order that's before you is in response to differing conditions than what we expected when we began to tie in the 36-inch pipe into the sewer conveyance system. The contractor actually had to cut a hole 30-foot deep into a underground box that was under where the pipe was, and had to build a wall inside that box and pour an invert to allow a smooth flow, smooth transition of the sewer effluent. The total for these two change orders is $58,196, increasing the contract amount with White Construction to $345,996. And as a reminder, funding for this project will come from year-end budget adjustments from utility reserves. So our purpose tonight is to seek your ratification of the actions that we've taken. Forward 2030 calls us to be good stewards of our assets, and that's what we're trying to do in this case. I can respond to questions.
Thank you, Director Mills. Is there a motion to approve 2 change orders with White Construction and Associates for the emergency repair of the 36-inch sanitary sewer main and soil stabilization of the area leading to the Kimbrough Road lift station in the amount of $43,471 for change order number 1 and $14,725 for change order number 2, for a total amount of $58,196, increasing the contract amount from $287,800 to $345,996. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion by Alderman Yonda and a second by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion? Alderman
I
Sanders.
just have one question, Mayor.
Sure.
At our meeting on July 22nd, when we approved the sanitary sewer repair, there was a couple of comments about change orders coming, and I made an inquiry at that time about the change orders, and if we had, if we knew about those, why we didn't amend the agenda item before us at that time. If I recall, it was relayed or related to me that we didn't know the amount of the change order or change orders that might be coming. But less than 24 hours from our meeting, I picked up my mail in my mailbox and I found change order number 1 in the amount of $43,471. So I just wanted clarification from the administration on that timeline, whether or not we had that information less than 24 hours earlier.
Director Mills?
I would actually defer to Administrator Lawton.
Mr. Lawton?
What was that board meeting, Alderman Sanders? You said the 22nd?
July 22nd.
I believe it was July 22nd.
Yeah, my signature on the change order is July 24th.
So we actually knew this work was in process and was going to be needed, and therefore I told the board that we would have change orders coming forth, but we did not have the level of detail that we needed to be able to present an agenda amendment that night at that particular board meeting.
Yeah, and it wasn't, again, until the 24th that I signed the approval for the change orders. That's 2 days after.
I do see that date on your, on this, but this was dated July 23rd on the face of this memorandum, and I picked my mailbox up that day, so that is confusing to me then that your date is the 24th.
But I'm not going to present anything to the board until I look at it and make sure that it's accurate. Mr. Sanders' initials and Mr. Mills are on the 23rd. By the time we go through our process and sit down and talk about the change order in detail and what's all involved, at that point, we're given approval to go ahead and do the work. So there was a good 2 days, and it could have been longer than that. But we weren't prepared on the 22nd to give you a figure.
Okay, I just wanted to get clarification since I specifically had asked why we couldn't have amended that item and was under the impression that there was no clue how much it was going to be, but less than 24 hours it appeared, so I just felt the need to ask.
And Mayor, if I could,
Sure.
the second change order I signed on the 26th, and it was presented, or Mr. Sanders and Mr. Mills were working on it on the 24th, but I didn't give approval per our process until the 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda? Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Thank you, Board. We appreciate that approval so we can get this work done.
Thank you,
Brings us
Board.
to item 14 on the agenda, emergency purchase, Kimbrough Pumping Station debris removal. Director Mills.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Board, continuing with our response to the emergency sewer situation, as I described in our previous agenda, we bring to you another contract. We're asking for ratification of an emergency contract with Performance Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $193,526 to remove debris that entered the sanitary sewer system at the Kimbrough Pumping Station from the broken 36-inch sewer line. Over 30 tandem truckloads of dirt created that sinkhole that you saw there and disappeared into the system during that time, and into the piping and into the wet well that was just downstream from it, which is the Kimbrough Pumping Station. Administrator Lawton authorized contracting with PCI, who is a licensed and experienced contractor, in particular with this type of hazardous atmospheres working this deep underground in a sanitary sewer, on August the 1st. PCI has worked for us on this project for a week, and their work is currently suspended as the city of Memphis has stepped in and are now cleaning the wet well and making some progress towards doing that. So we have suspended PCI's work. Therefore, the amount that I brought to you tonight, this $193,526, we feel pretty certain that based on the hourly rate of what we're paying PCI to do this work, we've been able to cut them off because Memphis has come in, that it'll be much less than that. But we initially went on ahead and approved the contract, and we're still kind of pending with Memphis to see if they're going to get through in a timely fashion. We still may need to call PCI back to help us continue cleaning this particular lift station. And as mentioned before, this will come from a year-end, funding will come from a year-end budget adjustment from our reserves, and our purpose tonight is to seek your formal ratification of this debris removal contract. Again, Forward 2030 calls for us to be good stewards of our public assets, and that's what we're seeking tonight.
Thank you, Director.
Questions.
Is there a motion to approve an emergency purchase with Performance Contracting, Inc. for debris removal from the Kimbrough Pumping Station in the amount of $193,526 and for a year-end budget adjustment from utility reserves to cover the cost of this emergency repair?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens?
I guess I did have a question, but it's too late. Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries, and we move to, item 15 was moved to the preliminary agenda earlier. Item 16 was substituted for item 9K, purchase repair to well number 9 at the Johnson Road Water Treatment Plant. Director Mills, Director Piefer.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor and Board. Our purpose for this agenda item is to request authorization for National Water Service to make repairs and to reinstall Johnson Road Well Number 9 in the amount of $71,869. On April 26, we received bids from well companies Lane Central and National Water to pull Johnson Road Well Number 9. National Water Services was the lowest bidder at $3,100. National Water pulled that well and transported it to their shop where they tore it down, analyzed it, and recommended parts and replacement pieces. There were several internal parts, including shafts, bearings, bowls, oil tubes, and seals. The quote from them was $71,869, received by staff via an email on May the 30th, which does also include replacing 220 feet of our column pipe assembly and some repairs to that 150 horsepower motor. The City of Dyersburg, Tennessee initiated a well rehabilitation contract with National Water Services in May of this year. Using this contract, procurement verified the pricing was consistent with Dyersburg's contract, allowing Public Works to move forward with the repair of this high-producing well. We plan to piggyback off of Dyersburg's maintenance contract. The work to make this repair has not been started, but after the PO was issued, possibly tomorrow, we're expecting to have the well back in service in about 90 days. This is a 10-inch well. It pulls 1,800 gallons per minute. It is also connected into our electric generation system out at Johnson Road, so if we were to have power failures, we can run this well off of the generator that's sitting out beside the building. It's a crucial well to our system. It's been out much too long already, and I would respectfully request approval to move forward with this contract.
Thank you, Director. Is there a motion to authorize National Water Services to repair well number 9 at the Johnson Road Water Treatment Plant in the amount of $71,869?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Piefer, as far as the verification process with the City of Dyersburg, this is what you do as far as making sure, especially when we're looking for their original contract. Can you tell me what that process was and what possibly there could have been some confusion on?
Yes, ma'am. I'll go through.
Go ahead.
I'll go through the process. We spoke to. First of all, when we do contract administration, we do the vetting of that. There are several different questions that are asked, and each is fluid at that time depending on what that person answers. So there has to be a context of looking at something as a whole. When we talked to Mr. Williams, which we did talk to the purchasing agent for the city, we had a great extensive conversation with him. We asked him exactly what the contract that he had would do. There were two components of it. The first component was the well repairs, well inspection, and take apart, and any necessary repairs. That was one section. The second section was for a specific well. So that contract did two different things. It allowed them to have, in essence, an on-call for the first item for any repairs, and then the second was addressing a specific well, so that they could go forward and actually, if they had any repairs that needed to be done, they would have established labor pricing and established parts pricing for it. That's why they established, and it's in your notification documents and compliance, that their contract was from May 20th, 2019 through December 21st, 2019. It allowed them some time in there to actually be able to come back and say, oh, we need to do X. It's in essence almost like an on-call for that. That's how he explained it to us. He provided us with a purchase order that established those dates for us. We verified that with the contractor on July 30th when we sent that information to him in the compliance letter. We evaluated it and said, okay, this is what they said this was. What does this does? And does this match this quoting? And unequivocally, yes, they signed the compliance documentation and provided that to us. and that's what we used.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your thoroughness.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Director. Any other discussion? Alderman Sanders.
I have a question, Mayor. It was referenced a time frame from May of 19 through December, and it was stated it was in our documents. Where would I find
If you look
that?
on that
ahead.
compliance page, the first page, it says July 30th on it, Mr. Verlin Johnson. If you look at that bottom, that that first paragraph, with National Water Service, May 20th, 2019 through December 21st, 2019, which is verbatim from their purchase order and their information they provided us.
And that's on
Missing it?
this compliance sheet?
No, sir.
The letter next to it.
Of the agenda item. Okay. Notification.
First page.
If you'll bear with me just a moment, Mayor. Okay, I do see that on here. So explain again that it was a two-part.
It was
contract.
a two-part.
Go ahead.
It was a two-part contract. The first part of that, if you look at the bids and specifications, and we actually looked at those, and he provided that information to us. The first part was well repairs and inspection services and all of the items that could go wrong in a well repair. Bo could probably give you a lot more of that than I can. But that was the first blush part of it. The second part was the actual well that they had that they wanted repaired. Okay? And so therefore we took the part one and used that as our ability to piggyback off of that.
Okay, so when I spoke with Mr. Williams this morning, I guess he just failed to mention about the two-part contract. Then he did speak of the June or May 2019 contract to repair the well, and he said that had been repaired and the contract had been closed. So that led me to believe that there was no continuing contract through December. So I apologize.
No, sir. We ask a lot of questions that you probably are not privy to when it comes to doing contract administrating and vetting, and we just asked quite a few more, and it led us to that point. He gave us that information, and we would not have brought it to you for approval.
Right, and thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
And I did, I guess I failed in the emails that I had sent you last week. I guess I did not ask that specific question and didn't go that far in depth, so I apologize for that.
Sir.
But thank you
Thank you.
for addressing my other concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Thank you, Board. We'll get that repaired. Thank you, Director. This time we've reached the conclusion of our work on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen agenda. We are adjourned, but stay right here. We are now adjourned as the city's, convened as the city's beer board. First order.
I would also like to release staff, unless they want to stay in here, they're here.
Staff, go home, please. Clerk, you have to stay. Stow away.
Yeah. What's going on with that?
We are now convened as the City of Germantown's Beer Board with two actions of business in front of us. The Beer Board hearing for the suspension revocation of the beer license for Stony River Steakhouse at 7515 Poplar Avenue, Suite 101. Prosecutor Price.
First matter for the board is Stony River. For the board, you've got William Wall and the general manager of Stony River, Nick Elward. We would make a joint recommendation to this board. One, that Stony River confess the violation on May 31st. They did in fact commit the offense as described in the misdemeanor citation. We'll let the board know that the server who served the
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor, for bringing that case forward and bringing it to the Beer Board's attention. First order of business is, as the party has already admitted to guilt, is to bring forward a motion to acknowledge that. Is there a motion to find Stony River Steakhouse at 7515 Poplar Avenue, Suite 101, guilty of a violation of the Germantown beer ordinance regarding selling beer to a minor? Is there a motion?
So moved.
So motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
The admission of guilt is on the record. The city prosecutor has made a recommendation to impose a fine of $750 in lieu of suspension or revocation of license. Is there a motion in support of that?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Please put your policies in place, okay?
I think it's on. Okay, sorry about that. So thank you for the time. And Stony River Steakhouse takes this matter very seriously. And I even was going to say that they do even provide additional information to every server that they hand out a card to every server before at these meetings. It provides the date of what is the legal age limit, and this was just a mistake, but Stony River is taking the steps necessary to go forward and make sure that this doesn't happen again.
We do appreciate it. Okay, good. Best of luck to you.
You kept her on, though, right?
I'm sorry.
You kept her?
Yes.
Good, okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I know she's good.
Next case before the Beer Board is a hearing for suspension or revocation of beer license for Swanky's Taco Shop located at 6641 Poplar Avenue, Suite 109. Prosecutor Price.
Yes, sir. I would introduce the board to the following: Attorney Jack Sherman. Good evening. General Manager Jacob Hertzler.
How are you?
And also, as in the last case, the server who committed the infraction, Lori Holly, is also present in the audience. Strikingly similar set of facts. It's occurred on the same day, kind of a similar type sting. Also, though, wanted to put before the board strikingly similar remediation that was accomplished by the establishment. This is also a first-time offense. The parties have discussed this matter tonight and previous, and would jointly recommend to the board that Swanky's in confessing the violation be fined $750 in lieu of a suspension. They tell me that training has been given to the 3 other Swankies in Memphis, but also to the sister company Sheffy's, that they've put in place a process where they no longer accept any vertical IDs. Where in this case that was what we discussed with the server that sort of tripped her up and caused the confusion. But as with the last case, we just submit to the board that this fine in lieu of suspension is appropriate under all the factors and circumstances. It does vindicate the offense, it does promote respect for the board, and it does deter, we believe, future misconduct.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor, for bringing the case forward. Is there a motion to find Swanky's Taco Shop located at 6641 Poplar Avenue, Suite 109, guilty of a violation of the Germantown beer ordinance regarding selling beer to a minor? Is there a motion?
So moved.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Alderman Yonda.
I mean, y'all ask everybody. I've been there. I don't know.
Well, Alderman Yonda, why don't you wait for the second round, just because this is an admission of guilt. They've already said they're guilty. Yeah.
They've made the changes necessary to keep this from happening ever.
Yep. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Alderman Yonda.
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
The admission of guilt is now on the record. It's been recommended by the city prosecutor to impose a $750 fine in lieu of a suspension. Is there a motion of such?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. discussion. Now, Alderman Yonda, do you want to repeat that?
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun there. We were going so fast, Mr. Price, I didn't know what we were doing. I just want to make sure, because I know every time I've ever been there, you're asking for ID for gray-haired ladies, no offense, myself and others, but you've got the system in place now to keep that from happening, and you held on to her, right?
Well, we split ways a few weeks back. Mutual. She found a different opportunity.
Okay.
So,
Good. Okay.
but we're still in good relationship. So.
Good deal. Thank you.
And they have provided, they contacted Budweiser, and they've got a manual that they make every server in every position. Swankies read this, look at the IDs, look at the fake IDs that are being produced right now. So all services are aware of these type of IDs.
Any further discussion? Alderman Sanders.
I just had one question, Mayor.
Sure.
For our prosecutor. You were saying strikingly similar circumstances. In this case, was this server also prosecuted?
She was. In fact, I believe she's coming back before Germantown Court September 4th, final disposition of her case. I think in both cases, the servers have been caused to come to court, face court, both been faced with having to take a class on selling alcohol responsibly, and at the conclusion of things, paying court costs.
Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Fine has been imposed, and we appreciate you coming forward and putting in place the safeguards and explaining that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a great evening.
Thank you. Before we conclude the Beer Board's work tonight, I'd like to thank our parliamentarian, Dr. J. Earhart Brown, for being here. Ed, Al, Eric, and George, we always thank you for protecting and serving. We are adjourned. Yeah, it's long. You earned your